My background in music, I mean, I could go back to being in a crib and swaying to the rhythm of the dishwasher, which apparently I did when I was a baby. But I started on piano when I was 4, and that was mostly because my big sister had started lessons and, I wanted to do what she was doing. And so I started a little bit earlier than her on piano, and then did that more or less all the way through high school. You wouldn't know it hearing me play. It's ridiculous. It was not my focus, because once I turned 10 and could choose to be in band, we started in 5th grade where I grew up, which was in central Iowa. I, went to the whole instrument choosing thing and settled on trumpet, which I don't think going there I would have said, I'm gonna play trumpet. But then leaving, I was like, trumpet! I just ended up being good at it. So I did trumpet really hardcore all through, middle school, high school, did All-State a couple times, and then went to my undergraduate in Boulder, Colorado, and studied music ed and jazz studies, kind of. I did really strong in terms of what I would play. Performance-wise, it was really heavily focused on jazz. But that whole time, just loving orchestral music as well, and really, really loving music history. I tried to switch to history, and both times got talked out of it by advisors. Because I just love how all of that unfolded over time, and how, so much of it was controlled by the church, and how the splits happened between secular and sacred music. And that really blew my mind when I was an undergrad in particular. And then when I went back to grad school, I went for music theory, because I just also love thinking about the construction of a piece of music. Why does it sound so beautiful right there? Why does it sound so scary? Why does it sound so funny? It's the rhythm or the chords or the meter or whatever, those are all kind of theory things. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. But then I got into broadcasting and realized what I'd really always wanted was to be able to talk to people about music, and it kind of became like this perfect storm of that.
My background in music is pretty scrappy. I grew up playing music with my family and friends. I played in church and stuff, and that led to, I was in bands and performing and playing on stage and everything, touring and things by the time I was 14. So that became just kind of a part of my life. And as I got older, I went to a art school. Now it's called the Perpich Center for the Arts. It's an art high school. I went there, and then I didn't go to college until a few years later. I went to like a tech school to learn more about recording, and because all I had was my, on the ground experience. What I've done the most of music-wise is writing and performing and playing with other people who do, various kinds of rock and roll stuff. But I got into doing a little bit more serious composing and writing, and trying to get work doing that as well. I've gotten a little bit of work doing some soundtracks for like I did some theme songs for some radio shows and some like trailers on the internet and things like that. And I haven't gotten a ton of work that way, but I've gotten some, and it's always fun. And I love collaborating like that. Working on the show can be pretty humbling as a composer, because we're always dealing with talking to the best composers on the planet who are regularly working with great orchestras and at Abbey Road and stuff like that. And I'm putting together what I can, in my little studio. But that's one of my favorite things to do in the world, and music is just a big part of life for me. So I'm always composing whether I get work or not. But I've been trying to make some kind of more, I guess, serious music for the past few years, and more instrumental and more arranged, because I've done a lot of kind of following Bjork around for my whole musical life, and making kind of sampled modern pop music, you know.
Did you do the music for Level?
I did do the music for Level. Actually, I did. We were talking about me making a little theme song, and then I made that song that we use, and I just showed it to Emily. I was just kind of fooling around, and she liked it, and so we decided to use it.
Why is music important? I feel like music can't really be differentiated in this answer from the rest of the arts, personally. Let's start globally, and then I'll try and talk more about music. Because globally, the arts, you know, one of the things I learned in school back in the day is that art comes from the word artificial, meaning man-made, right? Because all art is man-made. If it's nature, it's natural, it's nature. But art is something that we as humans create. We do that because it makes us feel good. And that's important. And we also listen to music because it makes us feel good. And we create because it's part of our nature. But no, it's just part of who many of us are. I don't think everyone has that kind of creative need, or maybe it just manifests itself differently. Man, it's just sometimes you have to just get that stuff out. And even if it's just for you, that's important. But I mean, I'm trying to think of why I would say someone like Bjork is important, or why is Bach important, or Jeremy Soule important. And all of those things somehow add to our lives. And because it's an addition, it seems important. You know, if they took away from our lives, we wouldn't want them around, but they don't. Listening to these things, whether it's in a game or a film or on a record or an orchestra hall or a, you know, drummer in a subway station, it's fulfilling. As far as gaming goes, my background is way different than what music was. I mean, music was literally from the get-go. Gaming, very different. When I was pretty young, I don't even know, but we got an Atari, and I got angry at the game and threw the controller, and my mom walked in and saw me and took it away, and I never played again. And I mean, it, like, seriously, I wanted an NES so bad, and my aunt and uncle had one, and they lived 8 hours away, and it was just like the worst. And I grew up in a small town, and my friends didn't have them, and I mean, it was just the worst. And so I didn't have any of that, you know, and it wasn't until 2002, I think, that I finally realized, I'm like, wait, I can get a PlayStation now, like have a PS2. When I got the PS2, the first game I got was Grand Theft Auto 3, which is quite an introduction, re-entry into the gaming world. And, you know, as an adult, that was like super fun, and I just knew, I was like, well, clearly I'm going to play video games for the rest of my life now. And so that's kind of how that started. But, you know, as you can tell, I mean, that was 2002, so I missed out on a couple decades, really, of gaming. And that is a big weakness for me. I still, to this day, don't know much about that era. I mean, I know some, but I have none of the nostalgic pull or tug that anyone else had who gamed through that era. You know, so to me, hearing a Final Fantasy song is not the same. It's just not the same, and it never will be. It's just never going to be the same. And that is challenging at times, to not have that connection, you know, but I've certainly tried to make up for modern gaming in the last decade or more, and yeah, so that's kind of definitely my forte is the modern stuff.
I don't remember if we weren't allowed or if my parents didn't want to buy any, but we didn't have any game consoles or anything at my house, so every once in a while we'd get together with some friends and rent like a Sega or something, and then we'd have 3 days over the weekend to, you know, beat Sonic or whatever, and I remember those times well, and it was really fun. Also, actually, in more modern times, I have a son, and he is a bit of a gamer, and we play a lot together, and that is tremendously fun. He got me playing Minecraft, and we battle each other on phone games and things like that, but yeah.
I think it's really important. It's so huge and multifaceted, just like why TV is important or film is important, because there are aspects of those areas that connect to people in important ways. Movies can mean something very special to a person that can help them through something. Games are no different than that. Games can help us understand things. I mean, especially now, there are games being made specifically for that, to help you understand what it's like to have an alcoholic father or a grandparent with dementia, or, there are games that are designed for that, and then there are games that just naturally do that. You just have an emotional connection to it. And keep in mind, games have been a part of the entire human lifespan ever since whoever invented games back in the Dark Ages or whenever that happened, right? I mean, people play games, they play cards, they play dice, they play dominoes, they play, board games with their kids, and now they're playing video games with their kids or with their parents, and it's really cool. It's a way to connect. I mean, I've made friends all around the world that I'll visit someday and have a great time with. I mean, you connect with people, and whether it's playing words with friends on your phone with your cousin, or playing Call of Duty with someone you've never met in person but you talk to every night for the last 6 months. I mean, there's something important there. There's connections being made. And favorite game of all time, so easy, Vice City. Because here's the nostalgia thing again, because I grew up in the 80s, and that was so totally a part of my growing up. The neon colors, the music, the style, the everything was just the cars. And plus, I love driving. I've always loved driving. In video games, I always loved driving. I always wanted to play pole position at the arcade when I was younger. And I also really love shooters. And I mean, it combines the best of both worlds, obviously, in Vice City. And I found it to be funny. I found it to be brutally cruel to every single type of human on the planet, no exceptions. I didn't feel like it took itself too seriously, like I think some of the newer Grand Theft Auto games definitely do. So I would say Grand Theft Auto Vice City and Skyrim, a biggie for me. The Mass Effect series is big. Probably one of my favorite PS2 games was a game called Black, which was a first-person shooter that EA Games did that I loved and wish. It was maybe one of the first games where you could shoot anything and the bullet holes would stay there. Dragon Age, love the Dragon Age games. Also, I was really into Call of Duty for a while there in my life, but it's been pretty much Black Ops 2 was the last one that I was hardcore into, but my KD was almost 2, which is pretty big in a Call of Duty game, so I was pretty good. Which is why I don't play it anymore.
I'm not sure if I have a favorite game of all time. If I had to choose, I might go Mario 3.
There are so many reasons video game music is special. There really are. And that in and of itself makes it special, right? Because there's just so many cool things about it. You don't find interactive music on TV. You don't get interactive music anywhere else, right? It's video games. That's where you find that. And the levels they've taken that to in the last, 30 years is mind-blowing. And just the fact that in a game, they've learned that as we go through life, we're triggered by audio. That's how we get balance, right? That's how we, know if there's danger. That's how we know if the cat is coming or, whatever. And they've made that such an art in a video game to where you can walk door to door And if something scary is behind that door, maybe the music is doing something to indicate that. Or maybe complete opposite, right? Maybe no auditory cues can be kind of a magical experience as well sometimes. But the music in games adds so much to the experience. And the thing about it is, there are games that have music that's not very interactive, but still add a ton of things to it. Like, I mean, just think about the old 8-bit stuff. I mean, how interactive is a 2.5-minute Mario loop, really? It still adds so much. You know, I mean, it's like when we're driving on a road trip, we have the music on. It's just such an important part of the experience. But the interactivity is great. The fact that there's all this experimentation with audio and music in video games is amazing and surpasses any kind of, exploration in any other type of media.
Video game music is unique because there is no genre to video game music yet. It could be anything. And it works to serve a purpose. It's part of a team putting together something that's made up of all sorts of different kind of moving parts. And so the music has a utility, but it also is being used to tell a story, just like with movies or opera or whatever. But musically, for games, the landscape is just very broad. You can have mixtures of elements that you would never have in another kind of medium, or very rarely,
You turn on your TV and you're listening to music in a TV show, it's safer. It's so much safer. TV, there are obviously, shows and movies that kind of push the bar that way, but I think video game music tends to be way more experimental. I think the audience is more open to that kind of experience, and it just creates this kind of playground for just a little more crunchy harmonies or weird instrumentation or odd singing. I mean, there's just things that you hear in video games that you're just not going to find on TV. Such a special place for composers to write, and they know it, and a lot of the world doesn't, and that's another thing that's amazing about it. These composers, so many of them are just people. You're just not going to find nicer people in the world than, and I could go on and on, so even saying names makes me feel like I would be doing a disservice to the dozens and dozens of composers that we've met that are just generous and open and just as happy that you're interested in them, that they're talking to you. And that has been one of the other many things that just helps Sam and I to realize that what we're doing is important.
And as I always say, the whole 6 weeks I was working on this soundtrack, I was thinking, I can't wait to talk to Emily about this. Because in my mind, it is not a legit finished soundtrack until we talk about it on your podcast.
My favorite game soundtrack is, there's so many, it's hard, and I realize I ask my patrons to come up with this too, and I only allow them 5 tracks. Like, I don't even give them 5 soundtracks, I give them 5 tracks. I would say the first one I can remember loving and wanting to hear over and over and over again was a Game Boy game, Super Mario Land, because, I didn't have consoles when I was a kid, so that was like the first thing I had was a Game Boy, and that was the only game I ever had for it, and I loved it. I loved that music so much, especially the winning, like at the very end when you win, so good. You're flying in a little plane and it's amazing. The first soundtrack that made me realize life was different now was The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. I hadn't heard like what sounded like real orchestral instruments. And again, that kind of demonstrates the kinds of games I was playing and my exposure to games, because clearly there were games before that. That Halo, for instance, 2001, you know, that's what, 4 or 5 years before Oblivion. So, you know, they were doing it, I just hadn't heard it. Recent ones, Bioshock Infinite, will always be huge on my list.
I think my favorite is Bioshock. Gary Scheinman is a master.
The combat music is it's the most brilliant combat music I think I've ever heard in a game. Yeah, but then I can also go through like individual composers, be like, oh, well, my favorite so-and-so score is this, and my favorite so-and-so score. So yeah, it gets kind of ridiculous, but those are some biggies.
I had a long-running joy of listening to Dead Space 2. Which was fun, because it's like scary horror music, and Jason Graves, who did that, is really great too. I think it's important to tell artists' stories, and I think art in general is really important. And in America, gaming and video games tends to be kind of relegated to the not as sophisticated or something art form. It's not one of the big boys, along with movies and I don't know, fine art or something. But the fact of the matter is, people making games are, in all sorts of ways, visual programming, you know, the ideas, they're artists, and the music has just gotten very good in games, and the people who make it tend to be interesting. And so just shining some light on them, getting, you know, doing some journalism in that direction is just, I think, important for everybody, really, but particularly I think that games are underserved.
I mean, the thing that keeps me inspired is them. They are the ones who keep writing this amazing music, and it makes it really easy to want to talk to them about it. You'll hear something, you know, speaking of Jason, like Far Cry Primal, which was just percussion and crazy whistles and scrapes and sounds, and I just want to know what all those sounds are, where he found them, and how he used them. And it's fun to have those conversations, especially, you know, over time, kind of learning as much as I've had to learn even about video game music in general, because I didn't game when I was a kid. So I didn't really have the exposure to 8-bit, 16-bit, any of that really. And kind of learning that through this whole process and learning how it is now, it's just so fun. Just like, we always want to hear what's next. We're always so excited to hear what so-and-so is gonna do with what game, or, you know, it's just fun. It's really fun.